In 2025, there are over 80 legendary commanders in Rise of Kingdoms, but if you've played this game for any amount of time, then you will know that not all legendary commanders are created equal. They may all use the same legendary commander sculptures to increase their skills, but one legendary commander sculpture used on one commander might be worth a lot more than using that legendary commander sculpture on another commander. So today we're going to talk about 8 different legendary commanders that I personally feel like need a buff. Now, how the developers go about buffing these commanders is up to them, and look at me talking as if they're actually gonna they're gonna be watching this video and being like, okay, Omniarch said they need a buff, so we better get on it stat pronto. And that's not gonna happen. Okay, I would love it if that were the case. If I just said stuff and then things happen, that'd be awesome, but honestly I don't want to be responsible for that much power anyway, so I'm totally fine with it. But regardless, buffs in Rise of Kingdoms don't typically happen very often, and as a matter of fact, I can't remember the last time a commander was like buffed. It's been years for sure at this point. We'll talk about the nuance in just a minute, so make sure you stay tuned. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a partnered creator with Rise of Kingdoms, which means they support a few videos on the channel every single month, just like this one. But the most important support comes from you guys dropping a thumbs up down below and clicking that sub button. Okay, so as I was saying before, you know, when I say these commanders in this video need a buff, that could come in any form, right? If the devs wanted to go in and just buff a couple of skills, I'm not saying Liu Che needs a buff, by the way, I'm just using him as an example here. If the devs went in and buffed the skills, that'd be fine. If they wanted to give these commanders a museum relic or an additional museum relic upgrade, that would be fine as well. However they want to buff these commanders, it is what it is. I'm not going to go in and tell them how to do it. Okay, they have the data. I'm sure they would know a lot better than me, but I feel like these 8 commanders, something needs to be done because they definitely just feel like they fall a little bit short. Now, the one caveat that I have for this video is that I'm not going to be using any gold key commanders except for one. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to use any season 1 commanders in this video except for one, because I feel like it's important, so we will touch on it, but it would just be too boring of a video if I just went through and I just listed off Julius Caesar, Hannibal Barca, Frederick, we talk about Moctezuma. Like, these, I know he's not a season 1 commander, but like these are like the most obvious commanders ever, right? Like, of course everyone's gonna say they need a buff, and I've made a video like that before in the past talking about the worst commanders in the game. Maybe I'll revisit that topic another day, but in this video we're going to talk about commanders that are a little bit newer and that maybe once were viable but just fell off and they just have nothing to show for it. And this video is in no particular order, so with all of that out of the way, we're going to start with a fan favorite here, and that is Leonidas. Leonidas needs a buff, bro. First of all, they buffed his appearance before they buffed his skills. Like, if you remember, Leonidas used to look like this, okay? And I'm gonna be honest, I feel like his original design was just as cool. I almost like it a little bit more, if I'm being honest with you guys. I don't know, it's hard to tell. I mean, really, they just had him stand on this little pillar thing in the old one, and now he's flat foot. I don't know, he looks like a Giga Chad in either one regardless. I feel like his neck is a bit like longer and more jacked in the new one, but even still, okay, Leonidas is a iconic historical figure, and he's used in promotional materials for Rise of Kingdoms quite often, specifically because of how cool he is, how much fanfare there is around Leonidas as a historical warrior, okay? And in Rise of Kingdoms, he had a very short shelf life, okay? I feel like a lot of players back in the day when he first came out with Guan Yu, they used Guan Yu with Leo, and it was good for a bit. All right, it was good for a bit, and even when a lot of people were using that combination, I still wasn't that sold on it, honestly. I really wasn't. I was never really a Guan Leo enjoyer. As you can see, I never fully expertised my Leonidas. Back then I barely spent on the game when Leonidas first came out, and he's the mightiest governor commander, so like there was just really no good way for me to get a ton of sculptures of him. But boys, okay, a 3-second health reduction to one target, we have CPO Prime does that in AoE, and the damage factor here is a 3 target AoE, but it's a 600 damage. Even when he came out, a 600 damage factor was nothing, okay? And even when he was paired with Guan Yu, who would bump this up, it's really only like a 900 damage factor, right? So it's just not worth it, right? You go through the rest of his kit, he has a little bit of extra rage gain, but the problem with the extra rage gain is that is it really enough to like cast your active skill any amount of time sooner? It might be like after a long battle, maybe, right? Maybe, but it's just not that impactful here. 30% defense is solid. This only works under 50%, which you really don't want to be anyway. And the final skill is a stacking all damage buff, and it sounds really good, right? Because 10% all damage, you stack it up to 4 times, so that's 40% all damage. It sounds really good, but the moment that you don't gain a stack, you actually, everything falls off, right? And then you have to start over again from 10%, and then eventually you stack it up to 20, and then, oh, you didn't get it within 5 seconds, it falls off again, right? And so the uptime for this is not as much as you would think, and on average it's going to be lower than the total of 40%. The expertise here, when you fall below 10% unit, oh, so you mean when you're dead? Okay, got it. So when you're dying, oh, so you're already dead. Okay, got it. Like what are we doing here, right? Like what do we do? I mean, I guess it was meant to be the case that Guan Leo would be a rally combo because there's a conquering tree on Guan Yu, but all in all, Leonidas, his entire kit was only okay back in the day, and only with one commander, and ever since then he's hit the bench, and Guan Yu has lived on in infamy. They need to buff Leonidas. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. As a matter of fact, Leonidas needs a buff so badly that I feel like he is a prime contender for a prime treatment. I feel like Leonidas Prime is one of the commanders that the community would rally behind. Okay, no pun intended. Like Ragnar Prime is nice, everybody loves Ragnar. I feel like in the same vein, I feel like people love Leonidas even more than they love Ragnar, so I would love to see a Leonidas Prime. But if they wanted to come in here and just buff the existing Leonidas, I would be totally cool with that. Or if they wanted to give him like an even better like museum buff, because like let's just take a quick little peek here at our boy Leonidas and his museum buff. Where's he at? Here it is. Okay, so whoo boy, 5% march speed in 5% normal damage reduction, bro. That's so good. It's actually not that good. A matter of fact, it's like it's not even close to enough. Like we have commanders that are way better than Leonidas, and they just have better museum relics as well. Like they weren't even trying to make him viable with this. I feel like they were like they barely were doing anything. I don't know what the logic was behind this, right? I truthfully, I have no clue. Like if they wanted to make him faster, 5% simply not enough, or maybe they anticipated like really ramping this up, right? Like if you got like 20% march speed, 20% normal damage taken reduction, that would be nice, but would it even be enough to bring him back? I don't think so, right? I don't think so. And he is a Season of Conquest commander. It's not like he came out in season 2 or something like that, and like that's, you know, to blame. Like no, it's not like he's an older commander that, you know, by the time you get to Season of Conquest, like he's outdated. Like no, he comes out in season 3. Like he's allegedly part of the current generation of commanders, but clearly not. Anyway, moving on to number 2 here on the list. Again, this is in no particular order, but we're going to be talking about Banana Helmet Edward. Okay, Banana Helmet Edward is super interesting because back in the day, like I'm talking like way back, like right around when he came out, there was some talk and some usage for him as a rally commander. Okay, which is funny because you don't see the rally tree on him, right? And also the rally tree is on Tamiris, which is weird. I mean, they did pair together, but she would be the secondary, which is bizarre because if you look at the active skill here, Edward has to be primary for this to make any sense, right? Because otherwise it cuts this in half. But the thing about Edward is that despite that quirkiness, despite the weirdness in the fact that he was the primary of the rally pairing that he was used with, despite not having the rally talents, even though the other one did, despite all of that, okay, he was okay at rallying back in the day. I took a city rally from an Edward of Woodstock from a Giga Whale back in the day. Actually, I don't remember how much of a whale they were, but they hit really hard. The point is 2,500 single target damage is insane. Okay, for back in the day, that's insane, but the problem is a 1350 rage requirement. So this was like the first commander in the game where they actually bumped up the rage requirement by 35%. That's crazy. But if you look at the damage factor compared to like older commanders from back in the day, like it is significantly higher. For example, commanders like El Cid have 1,000 damage factor for 1,000 rage, and so here you're getting 2,500 for 1350 rage. It looks like on paper that it would be a good deal, but it turns out that it wasn't something that would age super well. Now I love the second skill here, 30% march speed, 30% health. Like hello, that's better than what we get on new commanders for archers. Like that's really good, right? Like we got 30% archer health on Zhuge Liang, but he has no March speed, right? Same thing with Shajar. She has what, 35% and 20% March speed. So you have nearly as much health but more March speed. This is amazing, right? Archers really needed this, and the rest of the kit looks really solid, right? A bonus to skill damage, more damage to infantry, you get a big attack bonus over 70% with a little bit of a defense cost here, which is stupid. And then the expertise, I think they finally actually fixed this. For the next 2 seconds you deal 50% more normal damage and 50% more counterattack damage. I think they fixed this. Regardless, Edward's skill cycle is just too slow to like really make use of anything. There's a lot of skills in the game that are triggered off of, you know, when you use an active skill. Also, the longer skill cycle delays the launch of the secondary commander's active skill, right? So if you guys didn't know, your secondary commander will always cast after Edward, and so, you know, he's not just delaying his own active skill, he's delaying the active skill of the secondary commander as well. So all in all, like, this rage requirement and the fact that he has to be primary, and I don't even understand that whenever this commander uses the skill you lose 300 rage, but buddy, you just casted, so you're at 0 anyway. So I don't even understand what's going on here. But regardless, I think this actually delays him an extra turn or something like that. I haven't gone in and checked. It doesn't even matter because the point is he sucks, okay? And he shouldn't suck, because you look at his kit and all this is actually like pretty good, especially considering for how old he is, right? You would think this would be really good. The problem is the active skill. This attack bonus falls off above 70 or under 70%. They need to buff Edward, okay? They need to buff Edward. He's been kind of irrelevant for a very long time here. If we take a look at his museum relic here, we'll see that he has 10% defense. So okay, that kind of just like makes up for the defense that he's already losing, and then a tiny bump to the skill damage. But like, the problem wasn't the damage factor per se. I mean, we have commanders in the game like Huo and Shajar that people use regularly, and Edward's skill damage isn't that much lower than them, and sure, this bump brings him even closer. So 1650 is real close to Huo, for example. The problem wasn't ever really the damage factor, it was the rage requirement, right? So I don't really know what they can do to fix Edward. Like, they'd have to really bump this up to make it worth it to delay your secondary commander's active skill as well. I don't know, but Edward of Woodstock, I feel like, has needed a buff for a very long time now, and hopefully eventually Banana Helmet will get one. All right, third commander I want to talk about here is the only gold key commander that we're going to talk about in this video, and that is Seong-Gye. Now, the reason that he's in this video is because I simply don't understand the role or function of Seong-Gye. I really don't, right? Because for this commander, he deals 1000 damage factor, and then if he's rallying, then he deals 1400. Okay, great. Stats aren't great. You look at everything else on the kit, 10% skill damage bonus, and if you have more units you get an extra 10%. But all in all, if you compare him to a commander like Thutmose, who, yes, he doesn't hit a rally, or as a rally commander he doesn't hit as hard to one target, but he does have an AoE, which definitely provides some utility as a rally commander, right? Because it means that enemies can't stand as close to the flag without risk getting hit by AoE, which is dangerous, right? He also has 15% more all damage when outside of territory, which when you're rallying, you're going to be outside of alliance territory every single time. So as a rally commander, he always gets 15% more all damage. You also get some defense here and a chance to increase the skill damage taken. There's extra counterattack damage here, instant proc damage. There's a lot to love about Thutmose, to where I'm like just not even sure who's using, like, do you do it for the archer health? Is that it? Like, I mean, I get that the skill damage bonus here is nice, but for example, you could just pair Thutmose with somebody like YSG or something for a massive amount of skill damage on the rally, as long as you can defend the rally. Maybe you would do like Siege YSG or something like that, and that's like the answer. I don't know. I feel like the fact that people question whether or not he's rally meta is the part that makes me a little bit confused. And again, we're talking about meta for like the early game, right? Because the end game, he's obviously not viable at all. But I don't know, it just seems so weird to me. It just seems super weird. You have a bonus to additional damage, but he's only dealing additional damage for 1 second, and then you have an additional damage here. I don't know. Again, I know he's a KVK1 commander, and I'm not trying to say that he should be on par with the endgame commanders? Obviously not, right? But even as a kvk1 commander, I kind of want him to be a little bit stronger than this even, right? I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. And then they gave him this as a museum relic, which the extra skill damage I guess is nice, but like there's just no way that this ain't gonna do nothing. That ain't gonna do nothing. You and I know it. Anyway, let's move on to the next commander here, and let's stop picking on archers for just a moment. But it's time. You knew it. You knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. I mean, what are we gonna do? Like, what it's Sargon. Okay, it's Sargon. We got to talk about Scargon. I almost said it's a clown show over here. Okay, so Sargon, I was excited about Sargon when he came out. Everyone else was as well. He's an infantry commander. People were hoping for something insane, and instead we got a really high single target damage commander that ticks over 5 seconds. Whew, that's bad. That's real bad. Now the only thing, right, the only thing that could maybe save Sargon in the future is if we get more infantry commanders that are maybe like combo attack damage commanders, right? Like if you look at the expertise on King Arthur, right, just for an example here, you have a chance to trigger multiple basic attacks in one turn, right? That's what a combo attack actually is. It's a basic attack effectively, or at the very least it can trigger things that trigger basic attacks. So you can hit a bunch of times in one turn, and if you were to like somehow line that up with the active skill on Sargon, of course you would have to convert Sargon in a certain kvk to a cav commander, right? So Sargon would be the secondary. Maybe you could like machine gun fire this damage factor to deal like 1500 each turn for a few seconds or so. I don't know, right? You could, or well, I guess it would be all in one turn, but regardless, like there's a chance to do it like that and be broken. But all in all, like he has a small amount of attack, a small amount of health. He's got like a tiny amount of defense. Like they kind of just gave him a little bit of every stat, but not like all in on one. Like I really would have loved to see like 20% health, 20% defense, or like 25 something like that, right? The odd debuff is nice, right? But the fact that to make best use of this, you need to pair him with a skill damage AoE commander in order to spread this AoE. And so yeah, I don't know, he just his whole kit just seems a little bit slow. He deals damage slow, he applies his debuff slow. It's just, you gotta really play around the Sargon. Like you have to really plan for him, you have to make up for his own weaknesses. It's just weird, right? It's a weird commander, and it had so much promise, especially because it's Sargon. Like he's a pretty well-known historical figure, but he just didn't really ever cut it. The only exception to that is swarming down a target, right? If you're swarming, you're gonna hit every single damage factor here, and you're gonna stack this debuff, which is quite nice. So all in all, like I would say he's decent to swarm things down. But even then, like I would say he's probably going to be power crept in that regard too, because he's really just raw damage. So all in all, I'd love to see Sargon get a buff, whether they give him like a crazy museum relic, or if they go in and like, you know, kind of inadvertently, they didn't give Sargon a buff yet, did they? No, he's way too new. They could like inadvertently buff him by adding more combo damage commanders to infantry, right? I mean, we already have one combo damage infantry commander who doesn't, I mean, he's not really a combo damage commander, he's a combo attack commander, and it just so happens to be on the expertise. But my point is, there's ways that I feel like they could exploit Sargon's kit to make him good, but the way that the current meta is, there's just no good way to make great use of him in open field PvP. And so I feel like, personally, I feel like he needs a buff. Let's keep it moving for infantry here and talk about Chook. Now, Chook is a commander that I quite literally forget exists. I literally always forget that he exists until the Wheel of Fortune for infantry comes around, and I'm reminded that he exists, and then I spin him like for a couple sculptures, and then I forget he exists again, right? He came around at such a weird like middle ground time where like he just, the damage factor just was not there. Like he came out in the middle of 2021, okay, and he's still got a 1700 damage factor, and if the target has less than 30%, then you deal 2000, even though at that time, didn't we already have Nevsky? Wasn't Nevsky already in the game at that point? Okay, no, he wasn't. He was about to come into the game. But my point is, like, it was so far into Rise of Kingdoms by the time we got Chook that it just felt so weird to have a 1700 1700 damage factor. Like, what is that? And for an infantry commander, he didn't have the skill tree, which isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but he also didn't have any tanky stats at all either. He only had infantry attack, 40% infantry attack, and there was nothing else on the kit that was tanky besides a chance to reduce skill damage taken by 50%, and it had a cooldown, right? So it's like, why is it 40%? As if 50 would have been like too broken. Like, come on, man. I mean, you can expertise him, right? And that'll bump the effectiveness up to at least dealing some damage back and lowering the cooldown. But like, man, he's just so weird. And like, you have to stack his skill damage bonus. Like, at this point, when he came into the game, we already had commanders like YSG, who just gave you 50% skill damage, just straight up, right? And then here they like lock his skill damage bonus behind a stacking skill damage bonus that resets if you lose it. It's just so bizarre. I mean, you're not going to lose it obviously if you have it maxed, but my point is, like, there's just, it's kind of the same thing as Sargon in this regard, is that you have to, like, it just takes so long to ramp up the damage here, and there's no, he's very squishy, right? There's no defensiveness here really, and he doesn't hit that hard. So all in all, Chook needs a buff. He needs a mega relic, to be honest with you guys. Like, they need to give him like 30% defense, 30% health, and like 700 damage factor minimum, something like that, right? I don't know. I feel like Chook is a commander that he's so unused and underutilized that they could literally just go in here and just literally just buff his kit, like actually just go in and buff the existing commander as like a thank you for those that have invested in him over the years. And like, first of all, no one would even know. Like, if they didn't put it in the patch notes, people wouldn't know Chook got a buff for like a year. They'd just be like, wait a minute, where did he get 40% health, right? Like, that would be, it would take forever for people to notice that all on their own, because people just don't even think about him, right? Like, he never comes up in like a commander testing video, like, oh, the new infantry's here, let's test him with Chook. Like, no one says that because it's a joke, right? So I don't know, at this point, like, yeah, they can give him a museum buff, but like, why not just buff him? Just buff the commander. No one's even gonna care. Just do it. Anyway, moving on, let's talk about Khan. Okay, Khan, you weren't getting away with it. Okay, you weren't getting away with a video like this without being mentioned at least once. Genghis Khan, everyone knows it. Okay, and just to drive my point home with Chook a little bit more, like, Khan was a KVK2 commander and he hit just as hard as Chook. Like, Chook, what are you doing, brother? Anyway, so Khan sucks, basically. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. He has a lower rage requirement, which even more so it drives home my point with Chook. By the way, he has less rage and still hits just as hard, but my point is there's no stats here, right? Look at the kit, no stats. All right, this only works over 70% units remaining. This one only works if you're under 50% units remaining, and so it's like, do I want to be have a lot of units, or do I want to have a little units, right? Like, should I fight to get below 50 just for this, or should I retreat when I go below 70? Like, how do you even use this, right? How do you use this command effectively? What am I supposed to do here? I have no idea. A 30% chance to extra cast your active skill is kind of cool, right? He was like the first one to do that, which is nice, but besides that and the lower rage requirement, he just needs a buff. He's a KVK2 commander who is not even good in KVK2. It's just weird, especially because Genghis Khan is literally Genghis freaking Khan. Like, he is super iconic as a historical figure, and yet in Rise of Kingdoms, he ain't good at all, brother. So I don't know what's going on here. Okay, let's go back to making fun of archers for a moment. Let's talk about Ramses. Okay, Ramses is super interesting because I feel like for a moment he had his moment, right? He had his moment for sure, but it didn't last that long, and he's kind of in this obscure weird position where he came out at the same time as Artemisia, and then she got used in the field more than he does. It's just, even though she was the garrison command, like, what's going on with Ramses, right? He also kind of suffers from the fact that he deals damage over time. It's over 2 seconds, so it's not as bad as Sargon, but it's still kind of bad. We don't really love damage over time, right? Especially when it's only 1,000 damage factor. Now, it does have a nice defense reduction and a heal immune to the target, which is good, but the problem with that is that healing has never really been that impactful in the open field. Like, right now we have Shajar, obviously, but like, for 2 seconds, like, the timing has to be so perfect there. It's just super bizarre. Now, the one thing that he does have going for him is that he gets a ton of stats, right? On the map you get 40% attack, and then on the next skill it says if you only have archers, you have a chance of gaining another 40%, and you take 30% less skill damage, and you get some march speed here. And then finally he gets 40% defense, which is also a trigger chance. So I mean, like, there's a lot of stats that he can get here, but like there's no raw march speed, there's no base march speed, right, which you would really need. And so like as a season 3 commander, he's dealing damage a little bit slow. It's not even that much damage, and it's not like he has like this crazy like debuff or anything like that. Like you have a nice single target debuff here, I guess, for 2 seconds, but like you might as well just use Nevsky if you want that, right? So I don't know, and he deals less damage than Nevsky, and Nevsky deals all the hits, all the damage in one hit, right? So yeah, I mean, he's obviously a little bit older. He's a 2020 commander. I think I got him at launch, I'm not really sure, but the point is Ramses kind of had his moment, but even when he came out, there wasn't that much healing that was really being done in the field, right? Like Richard was like the only big healer back in the day, and by the time Ramses came out, no one was using Richard, right? So I don't know, I have no idea what the plan was with Ramses. But if we take a look at his museum relic, let's see, does it move the needle at all, ladies and gentlemen? The answer is, of course, it does not. So again, like 5% health, like maybe at tier 2 and tier 3, if we ramp this up to like 30% health or more, maybe, but it's still missing the march speed. So it's like, and also like we're now talking about what, a 2200 single target damage. It's still worse than Nevsky at this level. Maybe it bumps up to 200 or 300 at the 3rd tier, I don't know. But Ramses is another one of those commanders like Juk, where I feel like if they just went in and buffed him, then not that many people would even notice, but I feel like it's kind of deserved. Like just buff him, why not? Like I know that they like don't want to risk, you know, offsetting the balance of the current meta, but like why not? It's a game, just have fun with it, just buff him, just see what happens, right? Like it's probably not gonna be that much anyway, just do a little buff and we'll see how it goes. And the final commander we're going to talk about in this video is another cavalry commander, and that's going to be none other than Chandragupta. I know you thought I was going to marksman there. Chandragupta, weird commander, just like the rest of the ones on the list here. And let me be very clear, I'm saying these commanders are weird because their kits do something different that doesn't really work with the meta, and I like that, right? I actually like that a lot. The problem is that there's just no good support for them, and at this point it's too late, right? Like you can't, I mean, those commanders are so outclassed at this point, like there's nothing you could do. But like there was no support for it, and so it just couldn't be super good. Now with Chandragupta, he was rally meta for a period of time, right? So like let's be very clear here, he was made to be a rally commander, and so of course as an open field commander he's not going to, you know, be top tier. And people used Chandragupta for a while, right? They did. So I'm not trying to take away from Chandragupta what he had accomplished back in his day, but these days it's just super weird. By the way, I love his design. He just looks so cool. Like he's freaking awesome. Look at the golden sword. He's such a unique looking commander. We don't have many commanders like Chandragupta in the game. So I mean, we have a 40% all damage bonus, and you stack blessed, okay? And when your expertise, you can stack it up to 4 times, and then you remove the stacks for 500 damage factor per stack, so that's up to 2000 damage factor, right? Which, by the way, you would rather just hit them for 2k, right? Like why wouldn't you want to do that, right? Like why do I have to stack these things just to hit for 2k when we already had commanders in the game that hit for 2k? Like I don't know. We also get a 10% damage taken reduction here. You also get 20% health, which was actually really nice, and the exhaustion effect, which is a really interesting debuff. I almost wish they underlined it here just to kind of give it a little bit more emphasis, but really he's almost so irrelevant that people don't even question it anymore. But regardless, it's just he's dealing damage in a weird way, and a way that I like, but there just wasn't ever any like really good, like imagine if other commanders could also stack blessed with Chandragupta, and so there was this synergy where you're gaining stacks from one commander, then you're getting stacks from the other commander, and you could kind of do like this really like rapid chain of like constantly stacking and hitting for 2k, and like that would be cool, right? But that just never really happened. He was his own stacks engine, and then he just fell into irrelevance basically as we got newer and better commanders, and so he's kind of just outclassed. So I would like to see Chandragupta have a buff because he is so unique, he's so interesting, and he did have a moment where he was good at rallying, but they should do something, right? Whether it's a museum relic or just buff his kit, I don't know. I feel like they wouldn't buff his kit because he is a rally commander and they don't want to mess up that balance, but you know, something to make him a little bit more relevant these days I feel like would be pretty cool. That's just my 2 cents. And then the last thing that I want to touch on here in this video is not related to any particular commander, but it's related to the museum system, because we talked a lot about it in this video, but like what's happening with the museum system? Like, where are we getting more here, or when, and why do so many commanders have only like 1 tier still, and why do some commanders of a troop type have multiple tiers but others don't? Like, it's super inconsistent. I feel like it seems like the early game infantry and archer commanders have triple relics, but you don't give that to like the leadership commanders or anything else. Like, why does Caesar only have 2? He needs it arguably more than anybody. But then you have Thutmose, who was better than Caesar, but he gets 3 now already. Like, I don't know, it just seems a little bit weird. And then you have commanders like Siage, who's also a gold key archer. The rest of the gold key archers have triple upgrades, he doesn't. And then same thing when you look at commanders like Pyrrhus, he only has 2 upgrades, even though Martel and Richard have 3. So it just, I don't really understand the rhyme or reason here. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is that it's just on a sort of as needed basis from the devs. Like, they just say, oh, these commanders need it more than others, and so we gave them more. Maybe that's it, right? But I would like to see probably a faster rollout of these museum relics. And the reason for that is simply because by the time a commander gets a museum relic, it's pretty much too late, right? Like, by the time Ramses and Leonidas got their relic, it's like, okay, and then what, we're gonna wait a year for them to get the second upgrade, for them to be another year behind. It just feels a little slow, right? And like, let me just be clear, I love the museum system, and especially when it came out, everyone was like, oh my god, this is so good for the game, and I do still think it's good for the game. It just feels a little bit slow, right? It just feels like it's almost a little pointless. And again, I know that they don't want to disrupt the meta and like screw things up too badly, right? So I understand that, but I still feel like even if they picked up the pace a little bit and ramped up the double and triple upgrade speed, I still don't think it would really change anything, right? Like, some of these buffs again are just like so irrelevant that even if Leonidas got his triple relic upgrade right now, I feel like unless it was insane, nobody would even unlock it. Like, that's how irrelevant Leonidas is, right? So I don't know, that's just my quick little evaluation of the museum in 2025. What's the status of it? Are we going to be getting upgrades faster, or who, when, where, why, and how? I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the museum. Let me know what you think about the current state of the museum in the comment section down below. Do you think it's good? Should they just leave it how it is? Am I talking about random stuff now at this point? I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below. But anyway, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, make sure you drop a thumbs up on it. It really helps out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. And while you're down there, comment down below which commander you think deserves a buff the most. Let me know. I want to hear from you guys. Was it one of the ones that I mentioned, or do you think a different commander needs a buff? And while you're down there in the comments, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This is Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.